All right, ladies and gents, as you know, about a month or two ago, I started on a kitchen project to basically remodel my kitchen. Now, I had originally not set out to do a remodel, but that's kind of how it ended up happening. And I wanted to give you guys a little bit of a tour of what I did. Now, this is how my kitchen looked before. It is the world's smallest kitchen. It's very tiny. You kind of step inside the doorway, as you can see right here, and there is a sink, a stove, a refrigerator, and then another little counter around this corner here. And that is it. There was all this space. The ceilings are very high. This is probably about a 9.5-foot ceiling, but nowhere to go. I mean, it's just boom, you're right there. So I, unfortunately, we had a sink leakage. Get over here. Don't mind, the door is already out. This is after I kind of started the project a little bit. But we got into this, and basically what happened is that the sink leaked, the spigot already kind of leaked, and then one of the drains started leaking. So, yeah. So basically, the sink had a problem, right? Big issue. So I was like, all right, well, let's tackle the sink. We're gonna have to change the sink. And let me show you the other side of the room. This is the other side of the room. Once again, very small space. The only thing I'd really done in the kitchen is added this countertop and this dishwasher at some point in the past. So the first thing that I had to start doing is I built my own countertop with pallet wood. This is wood off of pallets I cut up, out my yard. Did it like 1.5 inches thick, laid them on the side, glued them all together, and then proceeded with my belt sander to sand them down. So that was the very first thing that I did. From there, I moved on to starting to repair the drawers. A lot of the drawers, cracks. We had to put screws in, and it just looked messy. So I started sanding them down. I got some clamps. I started gluing them together, and it was quite the project. Let me tell you, quite the project. Just getting the drawers and everything done. And at some point along the way, we decided we landed on this kind of light green paint due to some other thematic things that we had going on. So that's where we're at. So then, as we started to paint, fix up drawers, I kind of just started on the cupboards, the drawers. I took the pieces of cupboards that I could down, painted them. Once again, just started repairing and painting. I had cupboard doors down in my basement. You're going to see a lot of crap around in my basement because it's just not perfect, but that's the point. We're in the process of slowly fixing things up over time, so it is what it is. All right, so we're doing this kitchen review. So then here is the big inspiration. So I basically had these copper handles on the cupboards, and as I kind of sanded them down, I realized, oh, that is kind of some decent copper, and I shined them up, and I'm like, that doesn't look so bad. And when I put them on, I decided, all right, we're going to have some copper bits here, and I was very, very excited about it. So when I found a sink secondhand. I bought it, and the guy who had the sink also had this hood, a range hood, which I wanted above my stove to, filter grease out. So I brought it home, but it was off-white, so I painted it this dark green to kind of go with that lighter green. Took off this nameplate and then put it back on, and just a cool, old-school looking General Electric range hood. So that was pretty exciting. I was able to get a pretty good color on it, and then I made this little copper tag. I was like, well, if I'm going to have like a little highlight of copper, so this is for the light and the fan. And so then I put it on the little switches there, and I was like, that looks pretty good. Dark green, a little bit of copper. And then I had to build a shelf for this to go onto. So I built this shelf, polyurethaned it, and then I figured out how to do this like copper kind of edging on it with some nails. And this is the video of me working on that. So I basically took small copper pipe. I cut it right down the middle. As you can see, I'm stretching and kind of flattening it out. Got this little jig that I figured out, and I just like hammered the crap out of it, and just kind of went to town and tried to straighten it out as best I could. I sanded off. This is my basement sink here next to my washer and dryer. Unfortunately, my washer and dryer ends up being my workspace for a lot of projects due to the fact that I really need to rearrange some stuff down in my basement. So I did a wet sand, flattened out more on my cement floor. You know, I'm using anything I can. I got to do what I got to do, right? So then I started to try to shape the copper over top of a piece that was similar to the size that I was going to be putting it on that shelf. So then I had to bend it. I bent every inch of that stuff with pliers and just kind of kept hammering it, shaping it. It was kind of hard to work with. Copper is technically, you know, it's very soft, but the fact is, as you can see, there's a lot of crinkles, and it was just tough getting it to fit to the shape that I really wanted. But I just kept hammering at it. You know, once again, there was, you know, I don't have the best of workspace. The workspace did get better, by the way, and you'll see that as we go. But it was, at this point, it's once again me, you know, fiddling around in my basement trying to do this stuff as best I can. Did a little more wet sanding to get it to the sheen that I wanted. It's really odd to sand copper, because when you wet sand it, it literally comes off and like looks like rust, but it's really just bits of copper, and it's pretty fascinating. And then this is how I put it on. I tapped it in, I drilled holes every so often, and then took these flat-headed nails and just hammered it in every so often. And this is what it looks like. This is what it ended up looking like. And I think it turned out pretty cool. Obviously, this is very up close. But overall, I thought it was pretty cool. At some point in the project, I realized I'm going to be needing to take a lot of my work out to my garage. I needed someplace to put my tools. So one of the very first projects I did was build this tool box, because I needed to be able to haul stuff back and forth. And I got a lot of little bits and pieces. You know, obviously my electric drill, you know, hammer, all this stuff, and I just didn't have a good place to put it. So eventually it became very full. My goggles, my respirator, all this stuff was loaded in there. Now the thing is like, I don't know, probably 60, 70 pounds. It's ridiculous how heavy that thing was, but I had to do what I had to do. And so finally we got to the point. I painted the cupboards, did some work. Now it was time to tear out the sink. And I think at this point the countertop was done. It took actually a couple weeks really to get that countertop done. The polyurethane was a problem, pain in the neck to get done. I kept getting little bubbles and little things, and I just had to kind of, you know, keep reworking it and going over it. But eventually we got there. As you can notice on the floor here, the water had leaked enough where I had to rip out the floor of this cupboard. But I wonder, you know, we were trying to do it as cheap as possible, so you're going to see in a minute what I did to that. Here is me now with the finished pieces of the countertop. I put it in 3 separate pieces. 1, 2, well, 4 actually. 3, 4. And I just, as you can see, nailed these 2 together first, put them in, and then slid these in and screwed them together from under there. But it was quite the ordeal. But that's how it looked right there once we got it all in, put the sink in. You know, started going with this copper kind of like vibe, and I thought it turned out pretty cool. And I left this empty for the longest time, but eventually we had a fix for it, so I was pretty excited. So I finally got my sink in, and everything, you know, came together pretty well. Of course, I got my cupboards painted, started putting the copper hardware on, and I really started liking the vibe and the look of it. Made this little spice rack out of a little piece of wood that was there, and then some other leftover bits I had. Thought it turned out pretty well. It says spices and such back there, but you can't really see it, which is my bad. Should have painted on the front, but oh well. As you saw, that floor of the cupboard was taken out, so I took plywood, I reshaped it, and I left this gap, and I polyurethaned it as well, but this is what I did. I went ahead and built a custom garbage can. Not enough space really for a garbage can otherwise in there, so this is what I had to do. And it actually turned out really well, and it's working pretty well so far. I can't really stuff it full because it's kind of hard to get the bag out because of the weird shape, but it works. It works. And here is the left side done. Pretty much. Don't mind my fan fins there. There was a ceiling fan that I took down and cleaned up. Eventually, I did change it out for something else, but this is what I was working on. So I had to, you know, use it therefore. So then I got to the floor, and thankfully, they hadn't done much to the floor. Like basically I'd covered linoleum for like years, and it was in beautiful shape. I had to do a little bit of filling in of the cracks with some putty and sanded it down. It did take a while, but you know, I was able to polyurethane it. I had some trouble with bubbling of polyurethane. Right there is one of the boards, just kept bubbling. I just eventually kept sanding and covering it, and eventually after several layers it stopped doing that. So that was pretty cool. So I finally got the floor done, and I was very happy with how it looks. It's actually one of the best parts of the kitchen. I really enjoyed it. And then here is me tackling the stove. The next part of this project was pretty tough to tackle. I had to take apart the whole stove door. As a matter of fact, I took panels off the stove, took the door completely apart. Here's me scrubbing out the door, and there was like 4 panels of glass. I took everything apart all the way down to the insulation. Oiled up all the screws. There was a little bit of rust from the heat, and you know, maybe the condensation over time. And I got the thing all back together and nice and clean. You can actually see right through the glass. Somewhere, some along the line, there was some drips inside one of those panels, and it was terrible. The floor of this stove looks kind of rough, but it's just a little bit of surface rust due to, you know, past burnings from pies or something. As you can see, I took panels off and whatever, and the panels I wanted to paint. So here's me sanding down these panels. Eventually I had to strip the panels down to like nothing, bare nothing. I tried to paint them green straight up, and the green totally it went to crap on me. So then I had to do this. I had to actually primer it down because the green wouldn't go. But eventually when I got it done, it actually turned out really well. You can't see it in this picture, but it turned out really nice with a little bit of copper bits that I put on there. These are all Pallet's Custom Kitchen. If you don't know what PCK stands for, that's what it stands for. And all these little copper tags are something I made, so now the stove will match other parts of the kitchen. So very excited. All right, so then this is the part that I got into. I painted all the trim. I had to take all this trim off. The trim was just kind of a pain in the neck. Fortunately, there wasn't a whole lot that was going to be visible when I was all done with the project, so I didn't really worry too much about that. Now, one of the big parts of the project was this window. This window was going into what's now this area right above me. And so I had to take out the window, and then I put, obviously, that sheetrock in there, and I had to learn how to use, this is actual plaster, so it basically feels like you're working with sand and cement. It's kind of rough. But I wanted to use plaster to kind of match what was there, and I knew plaster would cover in bigger holes, which I did have some big gaps. So this is me learning how to use plaster. I got it pretty smooth. Actually worked with it to learn how to make it pretty nice and smooth. When I got done, I didn't think it looked too bad, you know, with just the plaster. And then once I painted it and all that was going to be in front of it, there was no way you were going to notice the difference. So that was pretty cool. Now on stream, when I really got into, you know, talked to my wife, it's like, okay, we're going to cover this window, but I want to put something there. And I was like, well, how am I going to do this? So I sat down and actually started drawing out plans. Now, I did a whole stream, and unfortunately, I didn't catch the video. I basically did the whole thing, drew out the refrigerator and everything. I still have this piece of paper somewhere, and I don't remember. I think I have a picture of it as well. Some of you guys might remember me doing that stream, but I drew everything out to basically every, I think it was every millimeter equaled an inch. I think it was something like that. Then on the counter space over the dishwasher, this was a countertop that my buddy had built for me. The same guy who did this table and this mousse and several other things in this room. He had built for me when I was up there. I helped him, and so I had to resurface it. So I had to strip it. This is me, I restained it, I repolyurethaned it, and it was actually took a little longer than I truly expected. So it was pretty tough. But yeah, I think it turned out pretty good. It was a little lighter tone, but I wanted to match the other surfaces in the kitchen that I did. So yeah, I think it turned out pretty well. It had some kind of different marks from my sander, but it ended up matching the other countertop pretty well, so I was happy. All right, so now here's my garage. This is my workspace. So you're gonna notice a lot of crap on the one side, over there. Don't look there. I've got a long ways to go with just the whole process. Eventually, this garage, hopefully, will hold the Pallet Box workshop. For right now, it's just a catch-all. It's got some junk in it and stuff that needs to go. But this one half where my big old white car used to sit is now my workshop, and will be moving forward for not only building the workshop in the garage, but also building out the rest of the house. So here's where I started, and it was cold. It's January. It's freezing cold, so you're going to see me in a lot, bundled up quite a bit. First thing I started off with is I built this shelf. I said, I can build this shelf. I can put everything in it. I was going to do another shelf up here, a middle thing, and I just had to start with something. So I started with this. I got it fairly leveled, and then I started building this middle kind of column area, and it took a lot of measuring, and I had to strip boards, and there's just a lot of work. And this is the first, real project with any sense of precision that I've ever really done. A lot of this stuff here was a lot less precise. It was a lot more just like winging it. This had to be pretty precise. I'm building a drawer in the middle of it and all this stuff. Got me a pocket hole jig. That was an absolute lifesaver. And that turned out really, really well. But eventually I got this middle piece done. I ended up building one side at a time. It was very odd. It was a very tough project. I built one kind of wall section at a time, and then I fit the one in there, and then I fit the other one in there, and then I screwed them together, and I screwed them to the top, and I used these little spacer pieces to keep them consistent as I could. I could have maybe tried to build the whole thing as one unit, but I didn't know how I was going to make all that happen. Maybe just to get everything level and straight, that's how I did it. And then I put the kind of this shelving or this countertop piece back on, and that's how it was. Turned out pretty well. Is pretty level. It sized up pretty well. Got all that installed. Did some supports down here. The studs on the inside of this house are not consistent. They're not to any spec. It's a very old house. It's from probably the 1890s. So that was tough. You had to find studs, and that made it a little tough. But my pocket hole jig once again came out for the hero many occasions. And thankfully, I had to strip. So I had to cut these boards. I had to actually strip them long ways to get them as wide as I needed, because it could only have take up so much space, because I need to make that drawer. So I took the cutoffs. I looked at them and I thought, man, that's going to be really cool. So I took the cutoffs from these boards right here, and I made them to be the kind of roof, in a sense, to this little cubby. And it's pretty cool. Turned out pretty good. But yeah, I felt like those little cutoffs really came out nice. They really gave a nice vibe, and I'm excited to show you guys later once it's all stained and done. But that's where we're at so far. But that's how it was looking. Kind of into the project. A little rough, but it was coming along. Got this shelf in here. This is where the microwave was going to sit. I put a front kind of face piece on there so it'd look pretty clean and finished. Also put like a ceiling board on there. But there was so many gaps and things that I had to do. When I painted it, I had to do caulking. There was so much caulking work, kind of finish work. It took a long time. Then this is the kind of challenging thing was getting these straightened. I never actually ended up getting these straight. When I put the drawer in, I just had to kind of like, each of those were actually off a little bit. I just got one of them on the drawer, and then I mounted the rest of them kind of as they fit. It was a bit of a weird job, but it worked. At any rate, so that's how it was. It came out really well, even as a kind of a rough job. And then I had to get back to build the cupboard face. So basically, the top part was going to have doors, cupboard doors over it. So I had to build like a face piece, and whew, it was a bit of a chore. And it's probably one of the longer things that I had to do. It took a lot longer than I anticipated. So, but we got there. Once again, I am going to try to use this video kind of as a YouTube video. So if I don't respond to chat right away, or if I don't respond to redemptions or whatever, please don't take offense. So I want to stop it here because I was very proud, and I will get to those later. I was very proud of this. So when I put this in, there was no kind of ceiling stud. The ceiling studs are running the same way. Well, the floor joists in the upstairs are running the same way as this piece. So there was nowhere to screw this face piece on. So I could screw it in over here, but that left this part and all the middle like just loose, you know? So what I did here is I could get into the studs back here. There was a stud back here, but the stud was like out front of here, and I didn't want to have anything out front, but I wanted this to be very secure because it's going to have like 4 doors on it. And what if somebody actually needed to grab it? They're going to fall or something. I wanted this to be very sturdy. So I built this like, kind of like what looks a bit like, I don't know, an architect would, put in like, reinforcements. I built this like its own little thing, and then I screwed all of this onto it and then screwed it into the wall. So I was very proud of it. It's something very small and very simple, but to me it was like, working with angles and getting it all to come together. I was very proud of how it turned out, and used the pocket hole jig once again to like, sink the screws in and stuff. And I thought it turned out good. I put a reinforcement over there. On this whole side was reinforced as well, so everything would, hold together. And I had to do a middle reinforcement as well to keep the center of that cupboard face in place. But I thought it was pretty good. This is when I finally got the drawer in. It was tough getting the drawer in. The drawer doesn't close all the way. There's like a spring-loaded mechanism. Right, Zero and I nailed it. There's a spring-loaded mechanism that this drawer has. These ball-bearing, drawer runner pieces, but it doesn't close all the way. But there was no way to reach it back there. There's nothing to do, so it closes enough to get the little door closed. So I don't really care, but it was probably one of the toughest parts of I'm just glad it actually closed when I all got done with it. But this is, I'll show you eventually later what all this is for. And of course, we got that whole side done, and to move everything in, I had to get back to the fridge, because I wasn't going to leave my fridge looking like this. So this is how my fridge looked. Just a plain old white fridge from the probably early 90s. So I got busy. Let me go back here and show you. This little water dispenser, ice dispenser area no longer functioned. So it was just sitting there doing nothing, collecting dirt, whatever. So I thought, well, what if I cover that? What if I paint the fridge, I cover that, do some things, and let me show you what I did. So I started off with a piece of copper, cut it out of a 4-inch pipe. I had some 4-inch copper pipe. This is me kind of like trying to shape it, and then I got into hammering it. I used some old brake rotors. Brake rotors, I can't even talk, as kind of my hammering surface. And first of all, I had to like flatten it out, but then I wanted to texture it. So that's a lot of what you're seeing here is me. I tried to heat it. That didn't really help. I stopped trying to use any kind of heat. My torch didn't work great either. But I started to hammer, and then I discovered if I put it on a piece of plywood, you can see it curling up there, but that was me adding that texture. Then I had to add, because that piece wasn't wide enough to cover that all the way, I had to add these like kind of side pieces. So I had to basically use the regular 1/4 inch pipe, or 3/4 inch pipe, I'm sorry, maybe 1/2 inch, I don't know what it was. Cut it, flatten it, and then make these like side pieces that could go on. So it was like 3 pieces of copper. Yes, Eurydiah, it did. Everything was moving. Every time you'd hammer, everything would move. It was crazy. It was ridiculous. And then I had to cut and bend and shape, and it was a pain in the neck. To get this edge, basically what I was doing is I was building a little bit of a lip all the way around so that when I put that piece on and I screwed it in, it would, run up flush to the refrigerator instead of having this big, weird, funky gap. But let me tell you, this was a ton of work. This was a ton of work. And then I sanded it off with that texture, and all those pieces got sanded, shaped, blah, 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 blah. It was a lot of work. Then onto the handles. I took the handles off as well. So this is me taking some old copper pipe that I had. I also bought some fittings, copper fittings. Some of these bits are the fittings that I purchased. I didn't put a whole lot into it. And then I found this color at the local paint store called Copper Red. And it had a real nice vibe. So the plastic caps up here, I painted a copper paint, as well as, you'll see in a second here, the vent on the bottom. I painted it a copper paint. Really nice paint. Really worked out well. And at the end of the day, it came out, I felt like, really superb. And that's what the handles ended up looking like. I screwed them right to the fridge. My torch wouldn't get hot enough to actually use, like a proper, what do you call it? At any rate, the way you're actually supposed to attach these pipes together. So I tried some JB Weld. As a matter of fact, JB Weld held on most of the joints, but in some of them it did not. So these screws actually end up holding it in every point that it could come apart. So I thought it was pretty cool. I did this on stream. I actually painted this M, which is the first letter of her last name. Ended up painting this M on stream and these little like flowers and berries. And with the screws, and it could maybe even give you almost a little steampunk vibe, but it looks, I think it looks antique enough where it doesn't look quite full steampunk. So, yeah, I was very, very excited how it turned out. And the whole fridge I felt like really popped when I was done. It just really came together nice. And I was very, very happy because I hated that just blah white. Ugh. So, and I didn't have, we didn't have money to be putting into, appliances for sure. So, at any rate, that's what it ended up looking like, which I was very happy. And then we got back into using, back to painting. There was a lot of painting, a lot of finish work, all the cracks, all the crevices. I went to town with the painter's caulking and, wood putty to like cover up all the screws and everything. That was a ton of work. And then I got onto the cupboard doors. Now, what was really cool, if you look at these cupboard doors that were already there, they had this kind of bevel out on the back end. I think originally it was designed so you could open them that way, right? Like this kind of angle, which is like a router cut, right? Well, I'd seen a trick on YouTube of a guy who took boards and flipped them on the end, and he basically created his own jig. He tightened down a board running like crossways on a table saw, and then he ran his board across it so the blade kind of came down on the board like this. So that's what I did. And I was like, man, that matches up really, really nice. So I actually ended up matching my cupboard doors with my other cupboard doors. And I thought that was pretty cool. But these were made out of 3/4 inch plywood, and it was a lot of hard work. It was a lot of hard work. This door ended up being a little bit bowed, but it fits, so I'm just gonna roll with it. All right, so here's the middle drawer. I wasn't happy with how the drawer looked. You know, I had those pocket holes showing. It was very plain. I was like, if I roll this thing out, it's gonna look kind of crappy. So I decided to take all the colors that I had used and paint them all separately. And that's what I come up with. I did red on these bits. I did white on the like flat parts. And then I did green here. I actually used wood putty and covered up all those holes. I did as good as I could. Even you could still see some bits. It's not perfect, but I at least made it look nice. You know, like, and quite honestly, with the dark green, the light green, and the white, it kind of gives it almost like an Italian vibe, which I really, really like. And what's funny is this neighborhood that I live in was probably an Italian neighborhood back in the day. So I'm gonna say it keeps the spirit in a sense of this neighborhood and this town that I live in. I think that's kind of cool. You know, just this vibe of this kitchen that I did. It actually kind of helps to almost preserve this historical part of this, though. Who knows if anybody actually made their kitchen look like this. I feel like I at least paid some tribute to those hardworking Italian immigrants that moved into Pittsburgh many years ago and made it what it was. So I thought it was pretty cool. Now it's time to work on my stove. So I got the refrigerator stuff back in there, had that kind of area sort of generally figured out. And so now I kind of needed to go back and really work on my stove and get my stove back in. And I had a plan. I had different ideas of how I was going to make the stove and that kind of range hood. But one of the things I decided is I had all this copper pipe, this 4-inch copper pipe. So I decided that I was going to make a backsplash for my stove. You know, like a kind of a heat reflectant and you know, for grease and whatever else. So this is what I ended up doing. So I took a 4-inch pipe, I split it open, I bent it as best as I could in my vise. I literally then, you know, I'm like clamping it, right? I literally stomp on top of it with my feet. This was one of the hardest things I did. It's one of the hardest projects I did the whole time. I got it fairly straight. I kept straightening the best I could. The next day I'm working on it, right? I'm trying to hammer it. This thing, I'm taking off jackets because I'm getting hot. It was so hard because it was so big. You would hammer and hammer and hammer, and it would just buckle and then unbuckle and then buckle, and I couldn't figure it out. Eventually, I started to realize if I hammer the edges and stretch the edges, the edges are remaining the same length, but the middle's getting bowed out. Then I clamped it on a soft piece of wood and started adding texture because I wanted it to be textured like everything else. But that was a lot of hard work. So then I still needed to flatten this thing out. So this is what I did. Rotor on top of a rotor, slamming this thing. This took forever. I'm just sitting there, boom. I wanted to show you real speed because that's what it was like, and it sucked. And then I got desperate. And then look at this. I'm like taking this thing above my head, slamming it down. It was a pain in the neck. But yep, bang, 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 bang. I was like trying to use like Thor's hammer. I needed like Thor's hammer, a huge old hammer. Because there's no way. Yeah, I'm sure they did. It's nighttime. But that's how it was. Now watch this. I'm kind of over it by this point. It's been long enough. I'm like, you freaking piece of trash. I'm like, come on, straighten out. And like every hit would like, sometimes it looked like it would get more straight. So I'm just like, boom. Like, fine, take this, you piece of trash. Oh man, it went on and on and on. But you're not going to have to watch the whole thing, trust me. But eventually what happened is started making these circular marks. But with the little like divots and then the bigger divots, it actually ended up working out pretty well. And then I started hammering those edges once again, and it stretched the edges out. And eventually I was able to get it relatively smooth. And then I put it on a piece of wood, and I would clamp it down. I clamped it down and basically nailed it to a piece of wood. And you can see the little nails, and that's how it turned out. That's how it turned out. So there it is, and you can see it kind of has those rotor marks on it, but they're consistent enough along with the hammer marks. I think it looks okay. I think it looks, you know, hammered out, looks like hammered copper. I think it matches the other copper bits there. And that's how it turned out right there. I think it looks pretty good. It's got a nice texture to it. It matches the copper bits that I put on this shelf. It matches the copper. Well, I didn't have the copper bits on the stove at that point, but this was me basically right after I installed everything, cooking my first meal on the stove, so I had to kind of show that off. But you'll see the kind of complete picture here in a little bit. But eventually I did end up making also a small piece. I did have the video, but I didn't want to take the time to do it, of bending and shaping this little like spatula holder, or, you know, frying pan utensil holder. This is for like a grease catch, so you can like lay your hot utensil down there with, it's got grease or whatever on it, and it kind of runs into that and doesn't get all over your stove and run down in everywhere. So I also did that in copper. So all these bits, I did the little stove bits, the little burner markers. I did all those in copper, painted them, hand painted them, and hand painted all this out of copper plates that I hammered out of copper pipe that I had from Waterline, and from, like I said, that 4-inch copper line that was just in the garage. All that stuff was basically in the garage. The only thing I bought copper was a few of those bits for that refrigerator handle. That's it. And I didn't have to do very many of those. All right, so on to the next part of the project. You remember that middle drawer area? Well, if I'm going to have a 9.5-foot ceiling, I need a ladder. So this old ladder was in my house somewhere. I can't remember if it's in the garage or in there's another little building over here. And I decided to turn this ladder. I could have used other wood, but I was like, you know what? I already have a ladder. I was like, let's see if I can transform this old ladder, cut it up, and turn it into a small ladder. Because I had my dimensions. I needed about 50 inches wide after being folded. It can only be like 5.5 inches like deep. And here we go. This is what I did. So I had this old ladder, right? I didn't trust to climb up on it, so I was like, you know, it doesn't matter if I cut it up. So I literally chopped the thing up. Chopped it all up. This is one of the last things I did on the project, though it comes a little bit sooner in the video. There was nails in it holding. I was going to try to take all the dowel rods out, which is what you see. I have an old hand drill. Tried to get the dowel rods out. That didn't work. Not at all. So I ended up taking those side pieces and making, and I don't have all the video for it, but I'm making and basically cutting out. You can see I kind of cut out a lip for those to ride on. It wasn't perfect. It looks pretty rough, especially in this picture because of the glue. So basically cut out points for those steps. Those steps are actually parts of the side wood. You know, the side pieces, they're like parts that I wasn't, you know, they're on up the ladder. So I cut it all down. You can see the dowel rod still stuck in there. I just left them in, and I was like, well, I'll put it on top of there. It should give a little extra strength for them to ride on, because they were like nailed in and everything. It was a pain in the neck trying to get them out, and I couldn't. So I just put them at the same basically increments. So the dowel rods ran underneath each of these steps, and glued it all together, screwed it in with these big long screws, and I got it all together. And then I had to make as a folding ladder, right? So then I had to make the bits for the folding section. So that's what I'm doing here. I'm cutting more copper pipe. I'm flattening it out. I'm cutting it in half, taking off the sharp edges, and I'm basically creating 2 copper bands to go on the ends of those pieces that are going to rest and going to move and going to have a pivot point through them. I needed extra strength for the pivot. I needed a point, once again, if it rubbed up against, the upper plate, that it wasn't going to wear off. So this is how I cleaned up a lot of the copper, using my, my vise and cutting everything with this angle grinder and using, obviously, different tools to try to get it soft. But that's what I was doing right there. I was making this end piece and drilled holes, nailed it in, tapped it, shaped it right over the end of that piece of wood. And that's what the pivot point was going to go into. So I had to have that nice and strong on the end so that wouldn't just split out, because I had to be pretty close to the end, as you can see right here. I had some hardware from some chairs that had kind of just broken apart. So I had these bolts from that hardware. So this whole ladder was built pretty much, maybe except a few screws, out of some old hardware. Even some hardware that I just got off the guy I bought the vise off of. He's an old guy. He's moving into an apartment. Didn't need this stuff anymore. He gave me a bunch of old hardware. I bought a bunch of stuff off of him. And that was a big help. For really cheap. Like really, really cheap. I also got cement tools off of him too, which I may end up doing some cement work, block and brickwork around my house eventually as well. But he was a lifesaver with all that hardware and that vise that I used a ton, as you can tell. So then if you watch right here, basically this piece had the hardware going into. This is the top step. So this piece had those pieces going in, and then that's where those copper bands are on this so that it doesn't split out. And I glued that on really good. I clamped it as well as screwed, this board in with like 4 screws. And then I just used these clamps to kind of keep everything in. I will say these wood clamps are invaluable. I use them so often. It was the best, I think it was like $40 that I ever spent. Let me tell you, wood clamps are amazing. And these quick release ones, wouldn't even bat an eye. I would gladly spend twice as much to have those. They were a lifesaver during this whole project. So then I screwed in 2 pieces. I kind of used another ladder, an aluminum ladder, for sort of a pattern. So I used 2 boards on the other side for supports, and that seemed to be strong enough and do just fine. Then I had to cut those top bits off with my table saw and sand those bits off so that the top drawer was good. Then I used the same wood, stripped it down. Once again, had all this hardware now from this guy, and built these folding bits and climbed up it, and it held. So I was like, woohoo! And then I had to Dremel out actually points for the bolts, which was a little oversight on my part. I didn't really plan for that, but they ended up working just fine. Yeah, that's right, Blackbird. That's right. Oh man, ay. Sanded it all down, and surprisingly enough, even though it was pretty rough looking, once I got it sanded all down and everything, it ended up looking pretty good, which you'll see here in a couple seconds. I also used an old bicycle tire, which I got an idea once again off of YouTube, and use that as the grips for the bottom. I don't know why I have. Oh, there we go. So yeah, you can see down here on the bottom that these bicycle tires provide the grip, and it actually works gloriously. I think I had some footage of me making this copper handle, but yeah, once again, it doesn't look perfect. It's not aesthetically beautiful, but it's very functional. So this is copper. This is from that 4-inch copper pipe, and I just kept folding it over and over itself. I think I folded it over like maybe 4 times. It's very sturdy. I mean, sturdy enough, I should say, but it was pretty stiff once I had it all together. So that worked out pretty well for my handle. But at least it matched. It matched the aesthetic of the room, and I was happy with that. And this is, like I said, antique wood from this old antique ladder. And it drops. You can see as soon as I lift it up, it drops pretty good. I do use my other foot here because I'm holding the camera. But I can pick it up and slide it right in my drawer. And it fits, and it actually slides all the way back in, like completely. And I'll show you guys here in a little bit what else I have in there. And this is how the microwave area turned out. So that was this in this drawer here where the ladder goes. We got the microwave back up there. It fits. What was kind of cool is like the toaster, the NutriBullet, and the Keurig. My wife uses these two things a lot. She likes a lot of smoothies. She does coffee a little bit. But all this aesthetically all matched up. I was thinking about maybe painting something or like I did the fridge, but I was like, man, this all looks nice. I'm not going to touch it. It's black and stainless steel. Looks great, just as is. It's got its own little aesthetic. So I'm like, you know, we're good. We're good. I'm going to let it go. As you can tell, I painted, you know, the red that matched the refrigerator. I thought that was nice, a nice touch. I also back here, you can't really see it, but I built a little shelf back here for, you know, the smoothie cups and sugar and stuff. And as well, I did another couple bits. I actually made these hooks out of copper as well. So these hooks can hold, you know, 3 of our coffee cups. Once again, used the pocket hole sort of design here I just made this board separately later on, measured it, did some pocket holes and painted it, and screwed these on so she could have those. This is kind of after the food and everything's done, but you know, in place. So now we got some food up here. Of course, we put the problem was in our dining room we had several of these little standalone cupboards. They're like separate little cupboards that people just bought and stuck there that had all our food in it. So our food was kind of spread over 3 or 4 cupboards in the dining room, which is kind of weird. So I wanted a place to put all of our kitchen stuff. We even had a extra little thing for pans. So all the extra pans and stuff are up here. All the food is up here. And everything kitchen-wise is now in the kitchen. And with a handy ladder, now I can actually get there. So there was 2 things that needed to happen, though. Quick access for the kids to get little food bits, like things they would eat a lot, which is this drawer. And then needed a broom, so I did have to cut the broom off just a little bit. Not enough to make it unusable, thankfully. It's still very functional. And then we also did, I think it's one of these next few pages, obviously gave them easy access food items. Stuff that they, you know, peanut butter, you know, pancake mix, toaster tarts, mac and cheese, that kind of stuff that they can make. Canned soup, yada yada. And just kind of showcasing the drawer. But we also did all these bits fit in, including this little fold-out stool that I got from Amazon. It's just enough for them to be able to pull, and myself to pull out, put down some really easy, you know, fold-out stool that I can get into basically the lower level stuff. So I don't have to get the whole ladder out when I want to get just a couple things from like the first part of the drawer there. But yeah, this fits in real nice and clean. Comes in and out pretty well. Functions pretty well, so I was pretty happy. Now, on to one other small project is that I made, and I'll show you some other bits kind of finalizing this whole thing. I wanted something to be able to put my utensils in, so I took 4-inch pipe, hammered the top, flipped this, like basically cut the corners, flipped them up around, and screwed them to this polyurethane piece of plywood, and had my little copper holder. All the copper that you see here, I spray painted clear coat. So hopefully it doesn't tarnish, at least not very fast. That's what I'm hoping. If not, well, sucks to be me. At any rate, so there's my cupboard doors with all the food in it, with pans on this side, food on this side, cooking, you know, books, and there's tons of space up in there. And if I could probably do some other things with shelves and bins and whatever else, but that's how it is so far. So, and I just took some shots. I also changed the light out. This is a copper ring around here, so it even kind of matches, but you can never see it because the light's so bright. But I wanted to kind of give a little bit of a perspective from down below. Once again, there's the hooks for the coffee cups, and I'm pretty proud of those. I hammered those out of copper as well, like I said. Here's the countertop that I refinished that my buddy made. Here's that upper part that I did. I stained it, and then I polyurethaned it really lightly, and it actually turned out really, really well. I also did the same on this. This is also dark wood, so everything really matches nicely, and I'm very, very pleased. And that's kind of how it looks kind of coming in, you know, from the outside. And once again, I'm really happy with the aesthetic. It turned out really well. Feels really good. I think it looks good. Everything meshes and matches and vibes really, really well together. And there we are, ladies and gents. There's the whole dealio together. I have a little more space to maybe put some things up here. Don't know what I'm gonna do. I'm not really 100% sure, but we'll figure it out. And yeah, that's how it turned out. It all blends well, even though there's like this dark green and then this other red. It all seems to blend well and work well together, and so I'm pretty happy. And my pallet wood countertop, I think, turned out pretty good. It's got about 10 coats of polyurethane, maybe more. It's got a lot of polyurethane on it, let me tell you. But I made sure to seal it up really good with silicone. Everything seems to be watertight. It'll puddle, you know, like you can see it's holding water. So I'm pretty happy about that. There was you know, it's an old house. We're obviously kind of putting stuff over top of other stuff, and so it's you know, it could be really rough, but it turned out pretty clean, pretty nice, and it's got a nice thick glaze over top of it. But what I'm really happy about, the poly seems to be holding up well to wear. So I'm really, really, really happy about that. Like, super happy about that. Yeah, that's how it turned out. And Spice Rack doing its job. Everything's doing its job. And there we are. Ladies and gents, there is my kitchen project. That's how it turned out. That's where we're at. Let me get you back here to the whole kitchen. And there we are. Pallet's kitchen is done. It took me about a month and a half. Technically more if you want to count the... I started before Christmas and didn't get done until sometime in February, I guess. So it was a long haul, a lot of work. All those little projects took a long time, even in themselves. I took at least a week off streaming, so that was like a whole week of nothing but 10-hour days, I would say, rough, like at least on average, roughly. And then another week without, you know, like hardly streaming at all. A lot of painting, a lot of finish work. It was just a long, hard slog, but I was motivated the whole time. I was very excited to do it, and I'm super glad it's done. And that's one room down of many in this house. And eventually, we'll get to the rest of them. And there you go, ladies and gents. Yes.